This week, we'll be focusing on cod, and we'll be doing a classic paella, a Basque cod dish with garlic potatoes and Basquaise sauce, and Torskesuppe, a Norwegian creamy cod soup. Let's start with the Basquaise sauce. Roughly chop half an onion, a large red pepper or 2 small ones, and peel 2 cloves of garlic. Then, over a medium heat, saute them in a medium saucepan in a little oil until they start to turn golden brown, about 10 minutes. Meanwhile, peel about 700 grams worth of potatoes and cut 500 grams worth into 1-inch chunks and the remaining 200 grams into 1 centimeter chunks. Set the 200 grams of the 1 centimeter chunks aside in a medium saucepan, and then in a large saute or frying pan over a medium heat, fry the large chunks of potatoes in about 75 ml of duck fat for about 6 to 7 minutes until they are starting to soften. Then peel 8 cloves of garlic and slice 5 of them very thinly before mincing the rest and setting them aside. Now check on the vegetables for the Basquaise sauce. Add half a tin of chopped tomatoes, a bay leaf, a teaspoon of dried mixed herbs, 1/8 of a teaspoon of paprika, smoked if you have it, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Season it up with a bit of salt and pepper, then add about 80 milliliters of water and bring it to the boil before covering and simmering gently for about 45 minutes. It may need a little more oil as it cooks, as it cooks to prevent it sticking. Once the potatoes are softened, add the sliced garlic and cook for a further 8 minutes until the potatoes are tender and the garlic is dark golden brown. Drain on kitchen roll, and when cool, place in your containers. You can pick out the garlic as well if you like. Now, let's get the rest of our veg prep done for our Torskesuppe and paella. Finally, dice the remaining 1½ onions and add 1/3 to the pan with the diced potatoes and set the remaining 2/3 aside. Slice about 70 grams of chorizo into cylinders and then set them aside as well. Peel and slice the carrot into semicircles and add them to the pot with the potatoes and onions. Then, over a medium heat, saute the mixed veg in a little oil until the onions and the carrots soften and sweeten. Meanwhile, boil the kettle and make up a litre of fish stock with the 2 stock pots. You may not need it all. Then roughly chop the dill and set aside before doing the same with the parsley. Garnish your garlic potatoes with a tablespoon of the chopped parsley before setting the rest aside. Now, cut 225 grams of cod from the tail pieces for the soup, and then cut 155 grams for the paella, keeping 2 nice fillets of cod aside, about 150 grams each, for your dish with the Basquaise sauce. Then cut the pieces for the paella into 1-inch chunks and the remaining 225 grams into smaller bite-sized chunks, about 1½ centimeters for the soup. Set them all aside. When the vegetables are softened and sweet, add 1/3 of your minced garlic, about a clove worth, and cook out for a minute before adding about 250 milliliters of fish stock. Bring to the boil and then simmer until the potatoes are tender. You can let this mixture cool and then add the cod and cream to the soup when you come to eat it if you like, or just finish it off completely now. To finish it, bring back to a simmer and then add about 150 milliliters of double cream or creme fraiche, and then add the cod before gently cooking until just done. Season with a little lemon juice and then place in your containers and garnish with the fresh dill. When the Basquaise sauce has been simmering for 45 minutes, check that it's nice and thick, and if it's still a little thin, reduce down over a higher heat with the lid off. Then, using a blender, puree the sauce until it's very smooth before checking for seasoning. Now, the only jobs remaining are to cook the paella and finish the cod in the Basquaise sauce. Again, you can cook the cod when you come to eat it if you like, or cook it now, and then gently reheat it later on. If you're cooking it now, preheat the oven to 200 degrees. For the paella, you can cook it up to the point before you add the cod and prawns and then finish it off at a later date, or completely finish it just now. Before you start cooking the paella, soak a small pinch of saffron threads in a tablespoon of hot water and set aside. Now, put 2 pans on the stove, a large frying pan for the paella and a small oven-proof frying pan for the roast cod. Add a little oil to each and over a medium to high heat, brown the cod fillets on one side and the cod chunks on both sides. Add about 125 milliliters of Basquaise sauce to the pan with the fillets, and then place into the oven for about 5 minutes depending on the thickness of the fish. Set the brown chunks of cod aside. In the large frying pan, add a little more oil before frying the remaining onion and chorizo until the onion is softened. Then turn the heat down and add the garlic and cook out for a minute. Now add a teaspoon of smoked paprika and cook out a little before adding the remaining half a tin of chopped tomatoes and about 65 milliliters of white wine. Reduce until most of the liquid has evaporated before adding the paella rice and stirring it to make sure all the grains are evenly coated. Check the cod in the oven, and when it's just cooked, serve or allow to cool before placing in your containers. Then add about 400 milliliters of fish stock and the saffron threads with the water. Simmer vigorously for about 10 minutes. If it needs more stock, add it a little at a time, but it shouldn't be soupy. Cook for another 8 minutes, adding more stock as it is needed, then stir in 150 grams of broad beans. At this point, either cool the rice down and then finish off at a later date, or arrange the cod chunks and the king prawns over the top of the paella and push down a little. Cook for another 2 minutes and then place some tin foil over it and leave to rest for 10 minutes before serving. Cut the remaining lemon into wedges and garnish over the paella with the remaining chopped parsley. You now have your Torskesuppe, your roast cod with garlic potatoes and Basquaise sauce, and your paella. Enjoy your meals, and I'll see you next week.